Hello, and welcome to Calibre Conversations, our online book festival, where we chat to a range of authors in the hope of introducing you to great new books to add to your reading list. My name is Emma, and I'm joined by Calibre supporter and volunteer Mark, and we're really delighted to be speaking to author Richard Hooton, whose debut novel, The Margaret Code, was published in April. So, first of all, a big hello and welcome to you, Richard.
Hi Emma, thanks for having me on.
No, now straight into it. The Margaret Code, though it's your first published novel, it's fair to say it's certainly not your first rodeo in terms of writing. So, can you tell us something about your background and your career, and what brought you to the decision to write a novel?
Yes, of course. I'm originally from Mansfield in Nottinghamshire, and I studied for an English degree at the University of Wolverhampton. I've since moved up a bit further north, now living in Greater Manchester. But after the degree, I trained to be a journalist, so I went into journalism, worked for local newspapers. So my first newspaper that I worked at was the Mansfield Chad, my local newspaper there. And then when I moved up north, I worked for the Lancashire Evening Telegraph for a short while, and then I moved to the Oldham Evening Chronicle, where I was a reporter, and then worked my way up to news editor. Since then, I've become a communications officer, and I'll work as a senior communications officer for a local council. And I've always written. I've always liked writing. Used to write short stories and all kinds of things as a child. So journalism really was a way of it. It's all stories, really. It's just more factual, true ones. So it was a way, really, for me to sort of use those sort of skills and the things that I enjoyed doing. And then I'd always wanted to write a novel. So while being a journalist, I sort of got into writing as well. And that was where the Margaret Code first started.
So those skills transferred brilliantly, then, didn't they, onto your kind of debut novel in that respect? So that's worked really well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the novel, The Margaret Code, is your debut novel. Where did the idea come from, and how did you develop it? And indeed, if it doesn't give any spoilers, can you give us an overview of what the story's about at all?
Yeah. I'll give you an overview first of all. It's a whodunnit. It's narrated by 89-year-old Margaret, whose failing memory holds the key to a murder investigation that's taking place on her street. She's shocked by the murder of her best friend and neighbour Barbara, but she's convinced that Barbara trusted her with a secret before she died. But that's a secret that's now sort of buried in Margaret's ailing memory. So she sets out with her grandson James, who's a teenager, who's 15 years old, to try and recover the memory and investigate the crime. But strange things start happening in her home. She's got a secret past, and she's convinced that somebody wants her out of the way. But her family think that it might be her illness that's just getting worse. So that's the premise for it. The idea came about. I was kind of thinking about crime novels, but also thinking about my late grandma. She suffered from Alzheimer's in the last few years of her life. So I was thinking about her and about crime novels in general, and I just came up with the idea of what if there was an amateur detective who couldn't remember the clues, who had memory problems, and sort of really the real frustrations of trying to solve something where these clues keep slipping from the grasp. So that was where the idea came from. And then I've kind of developed it. It's two parts really. Part of it is a crime novel. It's a whodunit. It's got all the suspects and twists and turns that you'd find in a crime novel, but it's also Margaret's journey as she discovers her illness and coming to terms with that and how she deals with it.
The novel seems to have evolved over a period of some years, and you wrote a number of very successful short stories in between beginning of the novel and finishing it. Can you explain the interaction between the long and short forms of writing?
Yeah, certainly. It When I did the first draft of the Margaret Hone, we're talking about 12 years ago now when I did a first draft. And to be brutally honest, the writing wasn't really good enough. I don't think it wasn't a good enough novel, and I didn't get anywhere with it. And that was when I kind of thought I really need to sort of hone my craft, as it were. I needed to develop my writing, and I just did anything I could to try and improve. So I joined a couple of creative writing groups in my local area, went to writing workshops, and that's what got me into writing short stories and flash fiction. And they're a really good way of being creative and experimenting. Obviously, a novel takes quite a while to write, whereas a short story flash fiction can just be a short period of time. So I just experimented and tried all different styles, genres, different viewpoints with short stories and flash fiction. And I began entering them into short story and flash fiction competitions. And I started to see success with that. At first, wasn't getting anywhere, but then they started to get long listed, then short listed, and then I was fortunate enough to win some prizes and first places. And it was a way of gaining confidence and validating my writing, really. And it was a way of developing. I was getting feedback at times, and I was seeing what worked and what didn't. And I did that for a number of years. I probably continued doing that for longer than I needed to before going back to the book, just because I was enjoying writing short stories and the success that they were bringing. So then when I went back to looking at my first draft, I could see really where it needed improving. I could see what didn't work. And then I sat around working on that, coming up with another draft of it. And that was the point where I was able to get an agent and then a publisher for it.
As a trained journalist, you used to turning around stories very quickly and to very tight deadlines. Initially, when you wrote the first draft and then going back to it later on, did you find the idea of a novel quite daunting, given your background?
I don't think so. No, really. I think journalism with the daily deadlines, it has set me in good stead. Once I was working with an editor, and you've got those deadlines of getting drafts to them and getting work to them. I'm used to dealing with deadlines anyway, so that wasn't a problem for me. I can work up to that. And to be honest, I think I do better with deadlines. It tends to give you focus, and I'll even set myself deadlines now when I'm writing something. I'll want to do so many words a day or do a chapter a day or something like that. So I'll set myself a deadline even when I don't need to, because I think it just focuses you and makes sure you get it done. So I think that the journalism did help in that respect, in terms of I wasn't too daunted by that, although it's a lot bigger piece of work. I was able to sort of use deadlines to help with that.
Now, the key character in the novel is Margaret, which you've already sort of said was based on your grandmother. What sort of characteristics did you actually draw from the kind of real life Margaret?
Yeah, I've got to say, Margaret is nothing like my own grandmother. My own grandmother was called Millie. She was very, very soft, gentle person. Margaret, the character, is she's much more confrontational. She's kind and generous as well, but she doesn't take fools gladly, and she's quite nosy, which is what you want in an amateur sleuth. And she's, I say, a lot more confrontational, a little bit judgmental. So yeah, the characters are completely different. It was more using what my grandmother had experienced and had gone through. So I think there's a lot in the novel that anyone who's known somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's will recognise things there that she's experienced, getting lost, forgetting to turn the oven off, things like that are probably quite common with people that have that illness. So it was those experiences really, but I guess as well, there's the heart of it really is the relationship between Margaret and James, the grandson. So I did kind of use. I would add as well, by the way, that I'm nothing like James. I wouldn't do half of the things he gets up to. But really, it's the relationship between them. I did use sort of childhood memories. My grandma's always baking bread, so a house that smells of freshly baked bread. She would cook fish and chips that she'd homemade and bake herself. And the things in there, old-fashioned childhood games, playing tiddlywinks and marbles. These are all things I did with my grandmother. So it's kind of the warmth of the relationship and little things like that are just peppered throughout the novel. It was those kinds of things that I drew on for Margaret.
I think that's the expert of the characterization you've done, because I felt like we could relate to so many of the characters in the book. You know, everyone would recognize at least one of the characters. I really related to Irene, another of the neighbours on the street. Just you've got a lovely quote from describing her in the book, where it says, "She towers over our front gate with her stout frame and broad shoulders, her fleshy arms folded. a hurricane couldn't drown this woman out when she's in full flow, wouldn't even put her off her stride. And I was like, yeah, I know about two people like that. She was absolutely fantastic description of her. So I think that's the thing, it draws you in because there's so many people that you could recognize, I think, from your either past, present, or that you kind of recognize as someone in your family or someone so yeah, that's done really well.
But you've explained about the background, but even so, the idea of an 89-year-old heroine and a 15-year-old sidekick is still a pretty unconventional one. Were you concerned that that would be something people couldn't relate to initially?
No, I think what works about it is that it is unusual. Obviously, you want to do something that's a bit different. That's there's a lot of crime novels out there. There's a lot of amateur sleuths, and it's a partnership that's, I don't know if it's been done before. It's a different dynamic. So that really is what probably makes it stand out a little bit, in that it is something different. So no, I wasn't worried about that. That was the thing that I thought would make it attractive to publishers and to readers, that there's a different dynamic to it. And so while it's a crime novel, you've got Margaret's background and what she's going through, which kind of drives it forward as well.
And as a journalist, have you ever covered a murder inquiry at all? You must have covered a lot of different things in your time, but if you did it help or hinder writing the Margaret Code?
Yeah, throughout my career, yeah, I've covered a lot of murder cases, and I would say it's helped. There's one in particular when I was in Mansfield. It's quite a while ago. We're talking 20 years ago now, but there was one murder case where it was an elderly lady who was found killed, and it took the police around 2 years to finally get a conviction on it. But I did cover it from I was working that weekend when it actually happened. So I covered the first story on it all the way through for 2 years, right up until the conviction after the court case. So that, while the Margaret Code is not a police procedural or anything, it is two amateur sleuths investigating, but the police are obviously within it. So my experience with that did help inform me as to how the police operate. And there are scenes within that there's a community meeting, which is kind of based on my experience of what happened at the time. And the real life case, it was the first one to use familial DNA to solve a murder. It was the brother of the guy who had done it, who had been arrested, and they connected the DNA to what they'd found at the scene and realised who had done it. So there's bits within the novel about DNA and things like that. So yeah, I would say my experience of working as a journalist and working on cases like that did inform it and give me that experience, that I kind of have a bit of an insight into how such investigations work.
If you had to, how would you characterize the book? I mean, you've already expressed it as a whodunit, certainly, but it's got elements of a psychological thriller, particularly given Margaret struggles with her memory and her ongoing, though necessarily one-sided, conversation with her dead husband. It's almost a love story.
Yeah, I categorize it as a crime novel that book groups would enjoy. So yeah, fundamentally, it's a crime novel. Like I said, you've got you've got that drives the narrative forward and has the hook. But at the same time, like as I've said, you've got what Margaret's going through. So that really drives the character. It's kind of interesting that you've brought up the love story, because I mean, I've tried to put everything in there. I've tried to make it humorous. I've tried to make it emotional. I've tried to make it intriguing. So I think a lot of people pick up on the relationship between Margaret and James, and that's the thing that they enjoy about it, a close relationship between a grandmother and grandson. But there is also the aspect of the love story between Margaret and her late husband, Albert, and that relationship between them. So I did want to get that in there as well, that a long-term relationship. And again, drawing on real life experience there, my own grandmother, after my granddad died before her, and they had a very traditional relationship. She looked after the home, he took care of the money and other things. So she was a little bit out of a depth after he went, and that's when her Alzheimer's started to develop, and my parents had to do a lot more things for her and give her a lot more support. And so in the same way, Margaret's story begins with Albert's death, and and that's when the Alzheimer's starts to develop.
Now, obviously, here at Calibre Audio, we're all about the audiobooks. And your book is available in audio, expertly narrated by the brilliant Maggie Ollerenshaw. Were you involved in the creation of the audio at all, in any part of that process?
Not hugely, no. The publishers at Sphere, they arranged the audio, and yeah, they did an absolutely fantastic job in booking Maggie. She's an absolutely brilliant actress, and I think she's just the perfect voice for Margaret. She's got the warmth and the humour, and I think she's just great at doing it. It's an absolute pleasure to listen to her. In terms of my involvement, we did have some audition tapes that I'd listened to, but she just really stood out. I was absolutely really happy that an actress of that caliber was going to do the audio book. So yeah, she was just perfect for it. Both me and the editor, it was an easy thing to agree on which one we chose. And yeah, I think she's done an absolutely fantastic job of it.
Once you've listened to it, you can't imagine anyone else as the voice, can you? Either
no, straight away. Like I say, once I heard her audition tape, straight away it was like that's the voice. She absolutely is absolutely perfect as Margaret.
Your depiction of Margaret's struggles with some of the infirmities that can occur with advancing years is done absolutely brilliantly. Were you, or are you worried that it might unsettle some of the readers? It's so realistic.
I wasn't really worried that it would unsettle people. No, I think it is one thing in the book. I think it is on the cozy side of crime. I think, like I said, there's humour in there. I think it's quite gentle, although there's themes of aging and what that entails and the illness. I don't think it's too unsettling. I mean, one thing I was concerned about is portraying somebody, an older woman, when obviously that is not my experience. But at the end of the day, it's creating a character like any other character. It's just trying to inhibit someone, and I think we're all unique. I think we're all completely individual, and it was just kind of building up that character and adding to the mannerisms, things she likes, aspects of her personality, and I just had that voice, and then I was quite confident with it. But no, I wasn't. It is an emotional book at times, I think, but I'd hope there's nothing in there that would unsettle people too much.
Okay. Will we see another outing for the dynamic duo, Gran and Robin?
That's a good quote. It's a good question. I don't know is the answer. I am currently working on, I'm sort of halfway through a very rough draft of a completely different book, completely different story. It's still a crime novel and still has an aspect of familial. It's about a family. I do have an idea, and I do have an outline of a sequel to the Margaret Code. I was waiting to see how it'd been received, and so far it's been, the reviews and the feedback I've had have been lovely. It's been a really great experience having people speak to me about it and what they've enjoyed about it, and quite a few people would like to read another one. So I might just gauge it a bit further as to the feedback on it, and then maybe see about developing a sequel. If I did, I would want to take it a bit further, not do the same thing exactly again. I'd want something different about it. But I do have ideas for a sequel, so it's a case of time will tell, I think. Watch this space and we'll see.
That's good. I think, well, both Mark and I would definitely be reading the follow-ups for that.
Certainly.
We can't let you go, Richard. So what we'd like to do is find out a little bit about your reading habits now, if we may. So is there anything you're currently reading at the moment, or even if not, what book you might have read recently and enjoyed?
Yeah, a couple of books. There's one called Cloudless by Rupert Duster that I've recently finished. I really loved it. It's a great book. It's about a farming family in Wales. The oldest son goes off to the Iraq War. It's set in the early 2000s, at the time of the Iraq War, and it's kind of about how that decision and the effect of that impacts on the family. But it's beautifully written. It's almost poetic in the descriptions of the Welsh landscape and nature. So I really enjoyed reading that. So I could thoroughly recommend that. And I'm currently reading The Midnight King by Tariq Ashkenani, which it's very dark, but it's quite gripping. It's a crime novel about a serial killer. I'm about halfway through that, so but I'm really enjoying that as well at the moment. But yeah, very very different books. But I like to sort of I like to read a wide range of different things.
Yeah, they're brilliant. They both sound like they're right up my street. So that's two good recommendations for my book pile anyway. There's so much to talk about with this book, and we've only really just scratched the surface of it, but we also don't want to give too much away, because our members have got a real treat coming in store for them in discovering it for the first time. And Mark and I really enjoyed this. I'd also say, just as you already mentioned, that it's a perfect book for book groups. So if anyone is in a book group and looking for their next read, then look no further than this one, basically. The Margaret Code is available for Calibre members to borrow, and the book number for that is 21926. And that only leaves me to say a really big thank you to you, Richard, for joining us today. So thank you so much.
Thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Emma, Mark. That was a real pleasure. Happy speaking to you.